Welcome to the show. We have Jeremy Miller with us, the amazing, incredible Jeremy Miller. Welcome. How are you today?
Hey, I'm doing all right. I am so excited to be on the show with you guys. I love the show. I love Growth Design Podcast. It's awesome. As someone who's not a growth designer or doesn't claim to be, I feel like I learn a lot. So, it's great for me. Yeah, I love it. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
You're welcome. Thank you. And with me, as always, I've got my co-host Emmanuel.
Hi guys, good to be back again.
So we're here with Jeremy, and you've heard a lot about who he is as well as his background. And there's no better person to actually tell us that story beyond just what his bio says. So yeah, Jeremy, can you kick this off? Let's first of
Yeah,
all
for
start
sure.
with your background and tell us everything.
Oh my God, everything. We only have an hour. I don't know how long I've got. No, yeah, just like I'll give you the abridged version, I guess. But yeah, I've started out doing design early 2000s when I was in college, just doing freelance for my friends' bands. And I would do the design, artwork, and flyers and things like that. And luckily, this was like all before social media, so you can't actually go and find any of those things online anymore. They're like, I don't even think there's pictures of most of that crap. That hard drive's gone, which is good because those designs were absolutely awful. But yeah, over time, I started doing freelance, and one of my friends' bands they needed CD artwork and flyers. Like, hey, we'll give you a 6-pack of beer for a flyer or whatever. I'm like, oh yeah, sweet, 6-pack of beer. So started doing that, and then over time I realized, hey, I could charge for this. So I started charging, to do websites and things like that, and taught myself how to build websites early, HTML and CSS, like before WordPress and stuff. And so I would do designs and websites for friends and bands and all that stuff. And then I joined a band right after Katrina, and Katrina hit New Orleans in 2005, and I was living in Baton Rouge, about an hour away. I got like survivor's guilt, I think, so I'm like, I'm gonna move home. So I moved home and joined a band in New Orleans with this guy. He was a fantastic designer. He was an architect and graphic designer. And, we talked about doing design work, and I was like, yeah, I've been doing this, making a few $100 for websites. And he's like, $100, dude, we could charge thousands of dollars for a website. And I'm like, thousands of dollars? No way. So I started doing that. And then, I actually dropped out of school. I didn't mention this, but I was going to LSU for economics of all things. And, never crossed my mind at any point to take a design class. I don't know why. But my wife now, we were friends back at LSU, and she was a graphic designer, and I would kind of get her to sort of like review my designs, and she would give me feedback. But it never like occurred to me to maybe I should take a design class. I don't know. Just never thought about it. I don't know why. Mostly because I probably never expected to actually be a designer for my career. I always just sort of thought I would end up as like a, I don't know, insurance salesman or something. Who knows what I was actually going to do. But yeah, so I started doing that, and dropped out of school because I just like hated economics, and moved back home, and thought I'd be a musician, and that obviously did not work out. But started working with Kevin. We started a company called Oh My Graphics. Our logo was like OMG exclamation point. And we were, selling websites, thousands of dollars. I mean, we're doing really good. And I wanted to get married, and I was like, I need a job. I need like an actual job though. I'm not really like, not sort of inconsistent here. I need some like, I had no like retirement account or anything at the time. So I got a job working as a graphic designer at an ad agency down in New Orleans without a design degree, which was awesome. But I realized like I probably had to go back to school. So I went back to school for graphic design, but not UX design at the time. Yeah, so I started doing websites, and I think like a lot of people, websites kind of turned into web apps, which sort of evolved into UX design. And so in 2011 I got my first UX job, and it was like UX, UI, front end developer. It was like all like everything basically. It was like me and two other people, and we did it. It was like kind of consultancy. We did apps for startups that would come to us with money, and the owner of our company was actually a VC investor. He was an angel investor. So he would have these like startups he'd invest in, and he'd be like, yeah, here's a bunch of money, go pay my other company to to do some work for you. So anyway, so we did that, and learned a bunch of stuff, and I thought I knew what I was like, oh, I'm the best UX designer in the world, and I'm like, I thought I was amazing. And then I needed to get a better job because I was barely making anything. So GE was opening an office in New Orleans, General Electric, and they were hiring like everybody, like literally everybody in New Orleans that was in software worked for GE at one point. And I moved over to GE, and I got a job on an actual design team, UX team, with like actual UX designers. Some of them had like doctorates, actually knew what they were doing, like HCI and all that stuff. And I realized like, oh my God, I had no idea what I was doing. So that was like back in I think 2016, and ever since then I've been like kind of learning and growing, and still I feel like I probably don't know nearly as much as I actually think I do, but I think that's a good mindset to have. So that's sort of the I don't know, that was more probably
No,
more
it's
unabridged than abridged,
perfect.
but that's
It's
me.
perfect. I mean, I feel like for quite a number of people that we have on the show, it's always fun to see the non-linear journeys that everyone's sort of taking to get to the point where they are today. And yeah, so we've talked both off and on the show about a number of things, and one of those is your current transition back into full-time role
Yeah.
after you've spent some time sort of freelancing and running your own thing. And I'm just wondering, like, first of all, could you talk to us about that? What was the factor for that initial shift away from full time into freelancing and then back again?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the shift to away from full time was not my own choice. Like I think a lot of people, well, not a lot of people actually do want to go work for themselves. And to be clear, like I don't not want to work for myself.
Mm,
I think there's a point in your life when you're maybe ready for it, and a point in your life when you maybe don't. And it's interesting because when you think about people who like have full time jobs versus working for yourself as a consultant or whatever, I don't think it has to be like a one or the other thing. I think
yeah.
there's like sort of like it can ebb and flow, and there's cycles, and they might do it for a little while and then go back and forth. And I think some people want this and some people want that, and but their preferences change over time.
Mm,
But for me, I got laid off in December of 2023, just in time for Christmas, and I tried to find a job, to
mm,
be honest, and I thought, oh, I've got this relatively successful podcast. I post on LinkedIn. I'm a quote unquote thought leader, influencer, or whatever. People are gonna, it's only gonna be a matter of weeks before I get a job. And of course, like weeks turned into months, and then eventually, I couldn't find anything. But while I was looking, my buddy Casey, actually, we worked together at a consultancy down in New Orleans back in 2011. So we worked together then. He joined our team as UX designer, and so we've known each other for a long time, and he is always, he's not married, he's single, he doesn't have kids, so like he has like a different lifestyle than me, so he's been doing the consulting stuff for a long time.
mm,
And he was like, dude, I could use some help, I got a lot of clients, I need some work, would you be interested in partnering up? I'm like, yeah, hell yeah, let's do it. And so we did that. We started doing that, and like I said, I mean, I'm not opposed to working myself, but it's sort of one of those things where you just sort of like the hustle of it, right? The like sales, the like constantly finding work. It's never really knowing if you're going to have clients next month. I mean, at any point they could drop you. And to be totally fair, I mean, I know a full-time job, you might think of that as quote unquote safe or steady or whatever, but we all know that that's not the case, especially nowadays. And so, it was one of those things where I was like, look, I got, not to say I didn't have any other options, but it was sort of the path of least resistance, and it was what I needed at the time. So did that for a little while, and then got an opportunity to join a team full time as UX manager. And it was one of those things like I just, I don't know, it felt right.
mm,
I don't think it's like right for anyone else. It just felt right for me.
yeah.
So going back to full time, like I'm not opposed to necessarily doing the consulting thing, and I think it's great for some people. But like I said, we were talking about this before. Like I got a wife, I got 2 kids, I got a mortgage that's probably way more expensive than than I should have gotten. I got 2 cars I got to pay for. My kids go to like Catholic schools, I got to pay for that.
Mm,
Legos aren't cheap. I got to pay for Legos, and then all the other crap, everything's a subscription now, so there's all these monthly bills that just add up and add up and add up. And having retirement, getting benefits, getting health insurance. I mean, you guys are in Europe, so you don't have to worry about the health insurance, but here in the States, that's the thing we all got to worry about. Hooray for capitalism. And so you've got that, and then retirement accounts and things like that, and the matching and the
mm.
bonuses. So it's just it's less hustle. I just want to like kind of be done at 5 p.m., go home, and like, well, I am home. We all work from home. So like, leave my little closet office and go like pick up my kids and be done, and not have to like sending invoices and collections and taxes and what I mean? That kind of stuff. It just gets to be a lot.
Yeah. So now, I mean, just looking at you going back into full-time work, and I've also just started a new role, and it's just there's always that human side of UX, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially in the first weeks where you have to deal with back-to-back meetings and beginning to
Oh my God,
understand your teammates again, or your new teammates, and getting used to
Mm-hmm.
people and things like that. Honestly, the core of your book talks about just that human aspect, right? which is the title of this episode, which is just talking about the human element in UX. Now,
Yeah.
how do you think, like, you going, being able to shift your focus from being a consultant to being a freelancer to being a full time worker, how has that reinforced that importance of that human side of things for you?
Yeah, well, I just want to highlight the fact that the relationships are still critical even in consulting, and if not, if anything, it might be actually more. But you've got to have the relationships with people, and as a consultant, when you come in to a company, right, nobody trusts you. Like the people that hired you trust you, but the people you have to work with are like, who the hell are you? Why are you here? And what was wrong with what I was doing, right? And so they're immediately defensive, and so those relationships are really important, especially if you're supposed to work as a consultant with a team who's already there. It's one thing if they hire you to do the work from scratch, but a lot of times consultants will come in to supplement a team or to do another thing that the team doesn't have time to do, or to fix a problem that someone else perceives as a problem, right? And so those relationships are actually very important there. I think it's not too different from, joining a team. You have to go meet with the people. You got to talk to them, have conversations like, what's going on? What have you guys tried? What's not working? Why did they hire? Do you know why they might have hired? Why do you think they brought us in? Like for the, give me the inside scoop, because that kind of gets them to open up, makes them feel like you're not against them. You're actually trying to help them and stuff. So for the consultants, right? I mean, there's obviously the relationship with the client, but then a lot of times, when you think about freelance, I think it's a little different than like consulting in that, I hire a freelancer to go design a thing for me, and I'm a small business or a startup. I don't have anything. Can you just design the app start to finish? And you're working with the client the whole time. I consider that maybe more freelance, but then the consultant, I kind of see this sort of, and there's a lot of overlap, obviously. But for consultants, it's like, larger teams, usually somebody comes in, they're hired for their expertise. They help direct, they help push something forward. Usually, sometimes they're doing the work, sometimes they're not. But, they're coming in and they're giving advice and they're kind of analyzing everything. In order to really give your advice and to give proper advice and the right advice, you've got to understand the context. And you can't understand the context without those conversations, which often require that relationship building to get the right, because there's nothing stopping any of these people from just like ignoring your emails or ignoring your phone calls or not accepting your meetings or showing up late or giving you one-word answers that aren't really helpful. And so, it's a lot like, I think like UX research in a way. You've got to, get these people to open up, feel comfortable, want to share. You want them to be open and honest. And so a lot of that kind of comes into play, I think, and then obviously there's a lot of overlap with all the stuff that we do as designers. But yeah, I think hopefully that answers the question.
It does.
So the core theme of your book is that UX is just more than delivering design deliverables, right? And the title of your book is Beyond UX Design. So looking at that title, what does beyond really represent?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so beyond to me, and this is sort of, the podcast and all that stuff. Obviously, the book title came from the podcast. I was trying to kind of tie the two together. And originally, I was going to call the book like something completely different, not Beyond UX Design. I was thinking, master your craft beyond pixels and prototypes. But then as I kind of started thinking about it, I'm like, actually, this ties into the theme of the show and the reason why I started the show in the beginning. And so I wanted to kind of tie the book and the show together because the themes all overlap and it's all kind of part of the same thing. And the interesting thing is a lot of people that contributed those little snippets to the book were actually guests that I had on the show, with the exception of maybe one or two. But most of them were guests that are on the show that talked about a thing. And I had them come back and talk more about it in that little snippet in the book. So there's so much overlap there, which is why I kept the book titled Beyond UX Design. But to answer your question about the beyond part, when I came up with the show, I wanted to have UX design in the title because I wanted people to Google UX design and find the show, obviously. But then I was just like, it's got to be something else. Like, what is it that's different about the show? Why am I starting this show? And the show came about because I was doing ADP list for a long time. And I would get, for those who are not familiar, ADP list, you can go and sign up, find a mentor, and schedule a quick 30-minute call. Anyway, so I was doing ADP list, and I was getting almost every session was the exact same. Almost every single one. I mean, a lot of them were, not everyone, obviously, but a lot of them were, how do I find a job? How do I break into the industry? How do I do this? I'm having trouble dealing with these stakeholders. These people are difficult. What should my portfolio look like? Things like that. And so what I realized was those questions, most of them had absolutely nothing to do with the hard skills of UX design, right? It was all how do I influence a team? How do I, break into the industry is a nebulous concept. I mean, it's hard to answer that one, but a lot of the other things were really around, how do I craft a portfolio? That question is more about like storytelling. How do I tell a story? How do I influence someone without any direct, control? That kind of stuff to me, again, like all the things that are way, beyond the skills of doing the actual work, the hard skills that people talk about. And so that was the answer to me, beyond UX design. And then it kind of flows off the tongue, beyond UX. And then I could say Bucks and
Yeah.
BUX. And
Bucks.
so that was, it just sort of helped. But beyond, to me, the tagline for the show, and I say this at the end of every show, is you're more than a designer because there's more to UX than design. Right. And to me, there's more to UX, there's more to that stuff than the crafting the artifacts and moving pixels around on a Figma. So that was where Beyond kind of came about,
Yeah, I mean that's really really insightful, and everything you said, I believe everybody can resonate because beyond moving pictures on Figma or whichever tool you use, there's so much to deal with as a designer. I think that's really really good to know. Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like sometimes we might be, I don't want to generalize and say we're the only, but we might be one of the few areas or disciplines that get so hung up on tools that we use.
Yeah.
Because it's like you see an accountant, they're not about their Excel spreadsheet. It's not the only thing. It's
Right.
just one tool that gets them to perform a certain set of functions. But for us, it's almost like, oh, master Figma and master whatever.
Yeah, true.
Right?
True.
Yeah. I totally agree. I mean, like lawyers, doctors, plumbers, electricians, like engineers. Yeah. It's just like, oh, I use, maybe one CAD tool versus another CAD tool, but nobody's going to go in and like have a fist fight because they don't, and I mean, I'm sure this is the case. There's probably shops like engineering shops that like require you to use a certain tool, but I have a very hard time believing they're not going to hire a really qualified engineer who doesn't know how to use a very specific tool like a Figma. Like the questions like, do you know how to use a Figma? It's like I get questions like I've had people tell me, I've had people send me like screenshots of messages from recruiters that like require Figma. Like you can't just pick up Sketch or sorry, if you use Sketch, you can't just pick up Figma and figure it out. Like bullshit. You absolutely can. I'm telling you, they're almost identical. The key commands are different, and some of the things you can do, obviously, your features are not there. It's not feature parity, but it's not a lot different from like Photoshop. It's not very different from, it's layers and things on a screen. You move around, you place them, and sure, you can be more efficient at one versus the other. Absolutely. No doubt about it. But that doesn't mean you can't figure it out relatively quickly. So.
Yeah. So, looking at that communication aspect, like we're talking about the human side of things. We've established that UX is more than these beautiful interfaces that we have to craft. In your book, there's an allegory about Fred and Amy, and I want you to appreciate on those two things. And
yeah, that's funny. That actually came about because I used to do, well, I guess I still do. I have the talk ready if anyone wants me to hire me to come do this talk for your team, but it's about building better software with better relationships. And I give this allegory. I came up with Amy, by the way, is after my wife, who is in software, and she does this, I think, really well. But Fred, random person, sorry if your name's Fred, I'm not trying to call you out. But the idea is to sort of compare Fred and Amy. And we have, I think Jan was the user. Jan has this medical condition, and she has to use two different apps to track her condition. And what I'm trying to highlight here is how Fred's poor relationship with his team creates worse outcomes for Jan, right? And so Jan has this trouble using this app because, Fred, who might be an amazing, wonderful, talented designer, can't work with his team. He butts heads with his team. He argues with his team. He's not pragmatic. He's more focused on process and being very strict about how to do things, and he's less willing to compromise. He doesn't spend the time to get to know his team, and so the outcome is worse software. But ultimately, the outcome is a poor experience for Jan, who is not happy, right? Yeah. And then Amy, on the other hand, works well with her team, might be equally talented, or honestly, maybe even less talented. Who knows? But Amy is able to work with her team. She's more pragmatic. She's willing to compromise. She's willing to bring her team along, have them come along to research trips or sit in on interviews and get to understand, all that stuff and work out in the open and work with the team, be more collaborative, willing to adjust, not willing to fight for every little thing. And ultimately, Jan has a better experience. And so, obviously this is like an allegory. It's meant to hold like there's no truth to this, or like a spiritual truth perhaps, but not an actual truth. But I do call this out that sometimes you can be like Amy and do all these things right and still struggle.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of the other part of the book is about, where we dig into dealing with low maturity and all that stuff. But I think in order for us to really establish up front, and I think I did this early, I can't remember what chapter it is in the book, but I tried to do this early to establish that has to be there. Your mentality has to be that mentality that Amy has to improve other things, because you can't come in, act like Fred does, and try to force things down your quote unquote educate. It's funny, we did a live session yesterday with Joe Natale, and we talked about this education, right? I can't tell you how many times I've heard designers say, we just need to educate the business on how to do UX design. We need to educate them about the user. Like, I can tell you right now, no executive with a master's degree needs you to educate them about a goddamn thing. None of them. And so when you come to these meetings with that mindset that you're better than them, that you're smarter than them, that you have the answers and they don't, you have already started off on the wrong foot. So even if you've never actually met with them and you've never talked to them before, you're already starting off on the wrong foot. So that's the idea behind Fred and Amy, and you're setting that up, that like, this is where you have to approach your job from this perspective if you want to be successful. And yeah, that's the allegory.
So how exactly what you've just talked about, saying, I don't even know whether I should say this. Should I apologize in advance before I say this to anyone listening? But like, it's the arrogance, honestly.
Yes.
Where
Yes.
it comes from a place of you thinking that design is the most important thing after sliced bread, right?
Right.
And it's really, when your job is to, or depends heavily on having allies, and you cannot pause for a second to even recognize that sets you back 1,000 miles, right?
Yeah.
So now,
Absolutely.
allies are important. It's just the bottom line of the work that we all do. It's a system that's working together to achieve certain set of goals. So influencing your core team as a starting point is very important if you want to achieve, and then you go out of that. Now, for designers who might be thinking, okay, great, we hear it, relationships are important, allies are important. How can designers begin to identify and also cultivate these alliances? And sorry, this question is in twofold. And then does this tactic at all from smaller organizations to bigger companies?
I'll go backwards. I don't think they're different.
Good.
I think access to the people is the difference, probably, right? Like, small company, you probably have access to the CEO. They probably sit in meetings. They probably message people on Slack, which is interesting. I actually joined this team, Xometry, this past 2 weeks ago, right? And they've grown exponentially. And they're now a publicly traded company. And it was funny, as I was talking to one of the guys doing my one-on-ones, and this guy, Kevin, and we were talking about what's changed over the last like 6-7 years that he's been there. And he's like, oh, well, Randy, the CEO, used to come in and sit in my meetings. They used to ping me on Slack or whatever message tool they use, just to send me DM or text message, have his phone number. And now it's like, we've got executives from like all these big companies, and we're publicly traded. And it's like, I never see him anymore. And like, every once in a while he'll reach out and just ask me how I'm doing. But that relationship now is totally different. Like, he probably could, in theory, send a message to the CEO, but like, there's now 3 or 4 levels above him that he's got to now like deal with, the bureaucracy of these giant companies. So I think that is probably one thing that's different. The first part of the question was, how do you approach this? How do you start cultivating it? How do you identify the relationships that are necessary? Mm-hmm. I think what I would say is, and this is sort of going back to what you mentioned a minute ago about hubris, right? Is realizing that you are not the most important person on the team. Right? And you are just one small cog in the machine. So with that end, I think, to answer your question, it's there. I don't know that there's one specific answer, because every team is different. Every culture is different. How you do this remotely versus in person might be different. The size of the company might impact this. But I think, treating the people on your team like humans, and just getting to know the humans that you work with at the base level. So who are you working with on a daily basis? Get to know them. That's where you start. And then a great answer or great question in these meetings, like when you join a new team, for instance. Or let's say you haven't joined a new team. You've been on a team for a year, but you've never actually had a conversation with the people that you work with, right? One-on-one. Do this one-on-one. Who do you work with on a daily basis? Who do you think, if you're joining a team, who do you think you'd be working with on a daily basis? Schedule a 30-minute one-on-one. Get to know. Don't even call it one-on-one. Call it a get to know. Like, put that in the title. We're going to have a get to know. And it says it right there. what is the point of this meeting? For us to just bullshit for 30 minutes and just get to know each other. What did you do? Where'd you come from? What kind of stuff? How long you been here? What do you like? You like to do stuff outside of work, what hobbies, kids, whatever, right? Get to know them. That's it. 30 minutes. And then the last question before you get out there, is there anyone else you think I should know? Who else do you think I should meet? Right? And that's it, right? So, and then you ask that question to everybody, and then you start to build this sort of little web of all the people, and at a certain point, you're going to run out of names. And I'm not saying you have to do this all day, right? Don't have like 10 meetings a day doing this, but every 2-3 a week for the first few weeks, 4 a week, every day, 5 of them a week, and you get to know your team. And so, that to me is the core part. And as you do that, you're going to start to talk to product managers, stakeholders, maybe engineers, leads, maybe even not the leads, just the engineers who might be working on the team, all those little things. And you get to just know them, that's it. I mean, it's as simple as that. I think the other thing, and I think this is a problem with remote work versus in-person work, but remote work, you just sort of lose that random touch point. Walking through the hall, seeing somebody, getting water at the water cooler, right? There's a reason why we call it water cooler chat, because it's where people congregate and they're away from their desk and they just open up. It's just like, hey, oh yeah, how was your weekend? Blah, 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 that kind of stuff. And the break room, the chat, the getting coffee in the break room, like you miss those things. So when you're remote, you have to be more intentional about it. And, past team that I worked on, we had a game day where we would do like every other week for 30 minutes, 45 minutes on like a Thursday or a Friday, 4 p.m. We just play like online games like Scribble.io or just like kind of Pictionary, or like GeoGuessr was a really fun one where you they drop a pin anywhere in the world and you have to guess where you are, and you get points based on how far off you were. That kind of stuff is like really fun, and it's just like a chance for you guys to just get to know each other. So you have to be more intentional about it. The other thing I see people do, especially with remote work, and not to say you have to do this every time, because sometimes you can't, but don't jump right into meetings. Like spend the first 5 minutes, like just, hey, how's your weekend? Oh, you got any plans this weekend? Like, oh yeah, how's your kid? I heard your kid was sick, or, your dog was in the vet. How's your dog doing? Whatever, right? That kind of stuff. And then checking in on people randomly. Like I've got people that I work with in LA, checking in. Hey, are you guys doing all right with the fires? Like, how's everything? That kind of stuff. It's important to do. One, because it's just it's the right thing to do, to just check in on your friends and stuff. But also, like, it just makes them feel safe, like they can talk to you, and the whole point of all of this is to not just make a bunch of new friends. You might, but the point is to just make those relationships so that you are safe talking to each other, and you can have honest conversations without feeling like you're like fighting all the time. Because at some point when you're building software, you're going to have a hard conversation. Those relationships make the hard conversations a little bit easier. Not easy, but a little bit easier. And so that's really ultimately the reason why I think this is so important. But I hope that answers your question. Some like tips.
Yeah. I mean, those are like insightful tactics, like you really shared there. And I think when you're talking about these relationships, definitely what I see you talked mostly was more about probably when you work with maybe fellow designers, developers, especially those are like your immediate highlights, right? Now, let's take it a bit higher. Let's talk about stakeholders right now. I'm not going to say stakeholders are like God or something, but they are not regular people you get to see on calls, right?
It
Yeah,
depends.
it
depends.
depends.
I mean, yeah, for sure. You're certainly right. It can be that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And now, looking at a scenario where you have like a low design maturity company, like let's like a startup that does not really establish some of their basic design culture, right? And for me, based on my experience, it's really a pain when you try to navigate through these oceans of like you have to be advocating for the need for design, or trying to educate or share your ideas about how design should sort of like pivot the product, right, in terms of how it should run. Now, in this kind of scenario, how can a designer build a very strong relationship with stakeholders and effectively navigate their influences and everything?
Yeah. That's a good question. Yeah. So to your point, right? Stakeholders, they may be a person you have access to, and they may not be, right? So that's important to understand. I think the first thing that I would say in this case is like, and this is true for stakeholders, product managers, engineers, whoever, that I don't think anybody, maybe one or two, I don't know, but I don't think anybody goes to work wanting to build garbage. right? Nobody wants to build crap. Everybody wants to build great stuff. Everybody wants to do good work. So I think that's like the first, is recognizing the fact that even though the process is bad, even though people aren't doing the things we think they should, or they're doing them wrong or out of order, or they're skipping them altogether, that's how they know how to work. That's how the team works together. That doesn't mean they're trying to build junk, right? Everybody wants to do better. And I think approaching these conversations first from that perspective is really important. The other thing that I think about when it comes to someone like a stakeholder, I think it's important, and this is something, I don't think we talked about it today, but I know maybe you and I have talked about this when we were on our show, but we talk about empathy for users all the time. But what we don't often talk about is empathy for our team, let alone empathy for stakeholders, right? And I don't mean the people. I don't mean, the stakeholder like an executive driving a BMW and his fancy $1 million mansion. You're not saying empathize with him. I'm saying empathize for the role, empathize for the stress they're under, empathize for the things they're responsible for, empathize for like their thought process, and try to think about what they think about in the way they think about it, right? Because design, as we said before, is not the most important thing for them. Making money, most likely, is the most important thing for them. And Joe and I, we talked about this yesterday on that live call, which is, it's funny we're talking about this again, but they don't care about design. They don't care about processes. They care about outcomes. They care about what they care about, which is most likely improving some business metric, which is not going to be user satisfaction for the most part. I can guarantee that. User satisfaction will result from improving other things for sure. And user satisfaction improving will probably increase profits, but that's on you to make that connection. So when I say empathizing with them, what I mean is thinking about the things they care about and explaining it that way, right? Just like know your audience. When we're like giving presentations, right? You have to understand who you're talking to, and you can't go in telling them what you care about and ignoring the things they care about. So that's the thing. Like when we talk about maturity, we're talking usually about processes and things like that. But it could also be, like just like how things are prioritized, like the things they care about. So what I'm talking about, I think, is more broad than just trying to influence low maturity. But I do think that there's opportunity for that. Now, when we think about low maturity, the other thing I just want to stress is I don't think it's your job as the UX designer, especially an individual contributor, to change the way an entire organization works. That is not your job, right? So I think a lot of us take ownership of that, and we get stressed out and burnt out, and we beat our heads against the wall because we can't change it. It is not your job. I don't think it's your job. But I do think you can influence how your core team works, right? So if you have a product manager that just is constantly defaulting to whatever an executive says and ignoring everything else, you could probably have some conversations, maybe hard conversations, but again, that's why those relationships are really important. You have to have a good relationship with your product manager to influence them in some way. But I think you can work with them to say, look, I think we're going down the wrong path. This is the outcome that I see will happen. This is the thing, this metric they said they want. It probably won't be hit if we do this. I understand they said they want it, but we need to work together to figure out how to build better software. And so you can work with those people, I think, to influence that. If you can't influence that person, we talked about allies before. This is where allies are really important. Talking with other people, because if you feel the pain of low maturity, chances are very good other people feel it too, right? So find those allies, influence who you need to influence. I hate to use the like divide and conquer, like we're conquering somebody, like we're, but I don't like that term. I don't know of a better term, but like, break people up into little one-on-ones, have those conversations if you can, and help to change those people individually. Because I can tell you're not going to change their mind in a meeting, in a 30-minute meeting with 50 people. I can tell you that's not going to happen. So find those little people. I would rather have 50 one-on-ones than one giant 30-minute meeting with 50 people to try to change it, to when I'm talking about like trying to change somebody's mind, right? So anyway, I'm sort of going around. I hope I answered that question, but it's all kind of related, which is why I keep going off on tangents. But
I mean, yeah, it's the reason we also keep circling around it, right? So we've talked about low design maturity, high design maturity, whatever the case is. Let's bring it to the business side of things a bit, where it's like you're navigating business priorities. Design is not the first thing on your mind, right? But there are times that your job also means that there's something you call VUCA. So it's like volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity.
Yep.
As a description for different kinds of environments you can find yourself in. Now, so using this sort of framework that you've put in your book, I'm wondering, when it comes to those conflicting priorities and pushback on design decisions, and it's like, this is what the business needs right now, and that's it, go implement
Hmm.
it. That's your job. Keep quiet.
Yeah.
Like, how
Yeah.
then do you, like, the practical tips, if you've been in those scenarios yourself, how do you find a way to one frame? Because sometimes it could also be the framing of
Hmm.
how we communicate, right? That needs a bit of work. So
Yeah.
tips around framing, but also just presenting your ideas or even just dealing with those conflicting scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, I think this is where like relationships, or I'm going to talk about this in a minute, how relationships are so helpful for dealing with all those things. So the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, this is a framework that most executives have learned about. I can promise you. And what's funny is like most designers, engineers, lower ICs have probably never come across this before. VUCA probably sounds like this really weird word that they like kind of like, is that a real word? What are you talking about? But I can promise you, if you Google VUCA right now, you're going to find a ton of resources for executives, CEOs to manage their business in a VUCA environment. And you're going to see VUCA environment all over that quote unquote VUCA environment. That's all over the place. And it's executives learning how to navigate those challenges, mostly as it relates to like impact from the outside, right? So volatility in the market, uncertainty in the market, complexity in the marketplace, right? Ambiguity in the marketplace. And so these things outside your control. But I think you can take this framework and apply this to your core team, to your smaller team, and even to yourself by thinking about, and this is the thing that these executives are learning about, right? Is there are things that they can control and there are things that they cannot control. Focus on the things that you can control. So if the market is completely volatile and things are changing constantly, what
Yeah.
can you control to make your business more stable,
Mm.
right? So apply that to your core team. Volatility in your company, right? Leadership's changing constantly. Like I think in the book I mentioned this. Like I worked for a company. I worked for GE for 8 years, and over 8 years I had like 15 different bosses, which means like I had like an average 2 bosses every year, right? And with those bosses came, and some of those, by the way, for the last part, it was actually pretty stable. So most of the change was like, in 4 or 5 years. But with those changes came CEO changed 3 times, right? The business expanded and contracted. Priorities changed constantly. Things we thought we were going to be building in the beginning of the year were totally different towards the end of the year, right? And so, in that scenario, what can you control? What can your team control, right? And my hypothesis with this is you can control the information that you're able to get, right? And you're able to go out and seek information. Now, you aren't able to get all the information all the time, but the more information you have, that's your cheat code. The more information you have, the better off you will be. Now, you might not get the answers, like I said, but you can at least go out and find the information. And this is where the relationships are so important. So when I think about VUCA in terms of myself and my team, volatility in how the teams might operate. It could be marketplace stuff too as well, right? But like again, as an individual contributor, it's not your job, I don't think, to think about how the business is going to affect, like you can only control, you're not gonna be able to change how the business operates. You're not gonna be able to change the offerings of the business or the pricing or whatever. You're probably not gonna be able to change the roadmap by yourself. You might influence that, but you probably aren't gonna be able to have the sole decision-making power over it. But you can go and talk to people and you can get insights, right? We talk about ambiguity. This is one that you hear almost all the time on like job descriptions, right? We are looking for someone who thrives in ambiguity. Like, what the hell does that mean? Really? Like, nobody knows what that means. But what a lot of times what they're talking about, and you hear a lot of this, it's funny because you hear a lot of this with startups, but it's like as if, large companies don't have ambiguity. Bullshit. Like there's ambiguities everywhere, right? But what that means is you just don't know. You don't know what you're supposed to do. And so what do? You have to go and talk to people and figure out what is their perspective. What do you know? What do you know that I don't know? Right? Here's what I found out. Let me help you get more information too. So you're that sort of the keeper of the information, and you can go out and sort of get information and share information. And so for me, the practical tips is, one, understanding that volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, they're all challenges, but they're very different. And how you might approach them, I think, changes what you should do, right? Or how the scenario that you're in changes what you should do, and that changes your approach. And I think naming something and identifying it makes it a little bit less scary, right? And so I think that gives you a little bit more, it empowers you to go and do those things. So that's why I love the framework of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. The way that you go about overcoming them often is very similar in that I'm going to go and get information, right? Volatility, things are changing all the time. What can we do to help us, be more elastic and move when the things move, when the things change, right? That's a very quick example. Uncertainty. We know that potentially these 4 things could happen. We just don't know which one is going to be the case, right? I use an example of like, government, I worked with aerospace for a long time. So like FAA, if the FAA comes out with this thing, it might kill our business. Like they're going to have this new law that completely changes how we do things. Something happened actually in a lot of the is sort of volatile, but we had this thing with the FTC changed how we reported taxes or income or something like that. And we had a lot of international stuff shipping across borders and stuff, right? So like the company had to pivot completely and like change all the stuff we thought we were working on suddenly was like low priority. This new tax thing was a huge priority because if we didn't pass it, right, we didn't do the stuff, we would have had to spend, I don't know, like millions of dollars, whatever it is. So that uncertainty, like, are they going to pass that law or not? Leading up to that, there was a lot of uncertainty because there was a chance they might not have. So you're trying to plan your roadmap. You're like, are we going to focus our resources here or there? Right. So like in that case, you want to be nimble. Like if we made the wrong decision, how do we pivot real quick? Right. Or get more information so that you can be sure it's probably going to be this one. Now, in the case of this one, as an individual contributor, am I going to have any insight into what the FTC is going to do? Absolutely not. That might be a really bad example for an individual contributor, but I think that's a good example of like uncertainty. Complexity, right? When I think about software teams, you've got legacy systems, ERPs that you have to integrate with, APIs, third-party APIs. You might have a bunch of different teams that are supposed to share data. Like all this stuff's really complex. And in this case, like you might understand one little aspect, you might understand your aspect really well, but you don't understand the larger system. And so, from a UX perspective, if you want to design something that a user is going to be hopping back and forth between a bunch of different things, right? You have to go and talk to the other people and get insights and understand. So again, relationships really important there. And then ambiguity, it's one of those things like, we don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. What are we going to do? Right. What feature do we build? I don't know. So in the case of ambiguity, this is sort of like a bias for action is really important. Like, let's just go do something. Let's go test it out. Let's go check. I'm not going to wait until I know the answer because no one's ever going to give it to me. Let's go find it out, see if I'm wrong. One thing I really like to do is, if I don't know the answer and if something's really ambiguous, this is my point of view. This is what I think. Show it to people. Tell me I'm wrong.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So that's how you can, thriving ambiguity is really easy when you just like have a point of view, take it to someone and be willing to change your mind when you find out that it's wrong. So, that's some really quick tips on VUCA. That was not quick, but yeah.
I have a follow up on that. Just like the phrase that you used, have a point of view. And I think that another thing to sort of note is that having a point of view on anything requires you to read about it and do your research and understand it. Break down the problem into tiny bites and get a point of view. You can only have an opinion when you've done that work, right? So just a phrase, because the next question might be like, oh, okay, how do I have a point of view on something that's ambiguous and I don't know what to do? Do the research, find out about it, talk to people. That's how you break those things down. So
There was something you said there which I think I must have fallen into that trap. Is that being an IC and really want to move a lot of muscles, like really trying to make some high level changes in the company because of my passion, and for my drive. But I think I must have been doing it the wrong way and everything. I think I wish I'd listened to this. I wish I'd listened to this part of your conversations, right? And taking it to the next level, right? We've been talking about how effective communication is really important in to me it looks like thriving within your organization. Now, let's take it to the career aspect of every designers, right? How can designers leverage these soft skills and relationships to create opportunities and advance in their career? We've talked so much about within a job, your allies and everything, but now in the industry, how can you start to do this to create opportunities for yourself and advance in your career?
Yeah. So I think this is, again, like, I'm going to go back to relationships, but when you think about your career growth, right, you can do it internally, you can do it externally. So I think there's something to note here that you don't always have to quit a job, right, to get a promotion or something. And if you work at a very large company, there's opportunity for a promotion in your team, but there's also opportunity a lot of times to move around inside the company that you're in. So there's a lot of people out there listening who probably work at very large companies that have that opportunity, internal job listings that are only available for internal teams. So I want to make sure that this is very clear. Now, when it comes to relationships and career growth, you have the opportunity, I think, to leave the company and find jobs that way. You could certainly, go and mass apply on LinkedIn or mass apply on Indeed to get a job and get a promotion. I think that's probably, as we've all seen, probably less likely. So when it comes to career growth, I think relationships are key here for just finding opportunities. One, right? I've talked to a lot of people who have gotten jobs without ever applying for them, right? It doesn't happen a lot, and it's not the majority of the way people do hiring.
Yeah.
But a lot of times people are like, I know that person and I know they'd be a great fit for this job. So there's that opportunity for sure. I'm not saying that's the only way to get a job, but I think that one is very good. Now you could do that with like being a thought leader on LinkedIn. I can tell you from personal experience that does not actually help you. The best way to do that is to, show your value, have conversations, and a lot of that happens on personal one-on-one calls or getting coffee with people and things like that, sharing your ideas and all that stuff. Now, that said, we could talk about job hunting tips and stuff, but I think internally, I think this is where the opportunity for relationships really, really blossom. Internal teams, you have social capital, you have some political capital, right? And when we talk about relationships, the social capital is sort of maybe not measurable, maybe it's like more ephemeral, but that's how people in your company think about you, right? And when we talk about, a lot of people might say personal brand. I think personal brand probably needs a rebrand because people find it very icky, but I think of it as social capital, right? It's like, I give you a good example. Last company I worked at, my buddy Derek and I, we had a podcast together before Beyond UX Design called Retro Time. It was more like software related stuff. And so we worked together and everybody was like, oh, those are the two dudes with the podcast, right? So we were approached by one of their managers who identified the problem of this gigantic company. We've got 1,000 engineers across all these teams and software engineers, and they just don't know each other. They don't know each other. They don't understand who's working on what. There's silos and everything else. So how do we kind of bridge that gap and get people to like want to open up? So what he came to us was like, can we start like an internal podcast that's just bullshitting, like chatting with random people from the team so other people get to know them better, right? And so we called it Makers on Teams drinking coffee because we had to use Teams because we were Microsoft shop. And so we did that. And like everybody got to know other people on the team. But at the same time, people got to know me and Derek more because everybody was watching these things with me and Derek, and managers are watching it, executives are watching it. And obviously we're talking about, silly stuff and asking them about like favorite foods and all that stuff. But at the same time, we were talking about software. We were talking about our philosophy and how we work. And executives saw it, leadership saw it, right? And that was huge. And so, that's something to like really keep in mind. What's really interesting there is it's not your work though, because your work never speaks for itself.
Yeah.
Right. That's the thing that I think people have to understand. And so you can have really great work and go sit in a corner and never talk to anybody. Nobody will know about it. So you've got to, do great work. You can't go and do this stuff and have, never deliver. You've got to have that hard skill stuff, right? But going and like meeting people, talking to people, when you think about, internal opportunities, this is a really great opportunity for people to think of you when they have a new project come up or they have to backfill a role or something, right? So I think that's really important. And again, that's very easy to do. I think internally, it's a little harder to do externally when people don't actually work with you to know, those things. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. We could probably talk at length about like job hunting and how to use relationships, but
You talked about getting to know calls that you share that tactics when you're working within an organization. Now, let's look at the career part where this is like on the social part now. You are not at any job. Now, how do you, have like this kind of getting to know calls, like getting to know designers? Yes, when you go for events, it's easy to meet you. Hey, Jeremy, have a chit chat and everything. But over the internet, how do you just message someone out of the blues and like,
Well, I don't think you don't message them out of the blue. That's the first trick.
So that's the drill. Yeah. How do you build that relationship in such a way that you build a genuine relationship with people over the internet, like which is not kind of
Well, so I think Twitter is different than a place like LinkedIn. Twitter is more open and you can like interact with everybody. You don't have to necessarily follow people to see someone else comment and reply. So I think it's engaging with people first, right? Before you ever send them a DM. So I'll use LinkedIn because I use LinkedIn a lot. I'm not really on Twitter or X or whatever. I started Blue Sky recently, but I actually don't talk about design on it at all. It's just like stupid thoughts I have. Like I used to use Twitter back in the day when Twitter was Twitter. So anyway, yeah, it's engaging, right? So like I'll give you an example. Let's say you identify, and we'll talk about it in terms of wanting to get a job somewhere, right? So I identified a company I really want to work for. I go on LinkedIn, I find anybody and everybody that works there. Because not everybody's active on LinkedIn. So you have to find the people who are actually active for this to work, obviously. But you go and you find people who are active. Let's say they're software engineers. Let's say they're designers. Let's say they're product managers. It doesn't matter. I wouldn't even look for the managers and I wouldn't look for the recruiters because they're going to get inundated with people trying to befriend them and message them and everything else. So don't go that route, right? Go around it. So how can you go around it? You find the individual contributors. You find the people on their team. You find people who work there but don't have a lot of power, right? Or authority, maybe is a better way to say that. And find them people who are active. They post. You like it. You comment, right? You interact with them. You do that for a month, right? This is not a quick process. You do that for a month. They get to know you. They might follow you back. They might start interacting with your stuff, right? And then you become friendly. You've had conversations, just not in a DM. You've had conversations in the comments. I like to say that the magic happens in the comments. I think that's where the most meaningful relationships I've built have been through comments. Like, I'll give you an example. Chris Wynn. I don't know if you know Chris Wynn from UX Playbook, posts on LinkedIn all the time. Mm-hmm. I followed him. And I mean, it wasn't like weird. Like it sounds, when I say that, it might sound weird, but like I followed him and I just like started talking to him, messaged him. I loved his stuff. I agreed with everything he had to say. I thought he was great. His content was amazing. We started DMing after that. And then we got to know each other. And now we're like, I would consider Chris a close friend. If I went to Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, I'm going to hang out with Chris when I'm there. And so, you know, if he ever comes to Cincinnati, he's going to come over. I told him he could sleep on my third floor, hang out with us. I'd show him around, all that stuff. I consider Chris a friend. And it all started by me following him, commenting on his stuff, liking his stuff, and it just evolved from there, right? Now we're on Slack channels together, multiple Slack channels together. We DM all the time, you know? So, you know, we have video chats a lot, just random calls. That's a good example now. And it's hard to do that a lot of times because not everybody uses LinkedIn, you know? Like Chris is an influencer, obviously. He posts a lot on LinkedIn. That's his job, right? He makes money that way. But then if you're trying to get a job somewhere, not everybody's on LinkedIn. You might find people that have posted a year ago. I see people on LinkedIn all the time that have never posted anything, you know, so it's really hard to interact with those people, obviously, because they're never posting. But there are a lot of people who do. And I think that's a really great way to get your kind of foot in the door and have a conversation before you ever have a DM. I think sending a random DM to a person, they're just going to be like, eh.
Who are you?
Yeah, exactly. I get that all the time. And most of the time I ignore them. So, you know, that's my advice there is like, don't just send them a DM, but interact with them. And Twitter is the same way. I mean, you could find people, reply to them, start a conversation with them. And then eventually, you know, that leads to a DM. It might take a while, but you know, I use this analogy of you know, trying to get avocado toast on Sunday, right? I don't know Europe. I don't know if avocado toast is big in Europe, right? Yeah. But, you know, brunch. You get this nice avocado toast. You don't go and plant an avocado seed the day before and expect to have avocado toast on Sunday, right? You have to go out, you plant a bunch of avocado seeds, you nurture them, you water them. Some of them might die. Some of them might get eaten by like rabbits or something. Some of them might get ripe before you can pick them. So it takes a very long time before you can go pick an avocado and have your wonderful avocado toast on 7-grain bread with all the fancy fixings and stuff. You know, so it takes a long time and you got to cultivate these things. It's not a fast process. And so the worst thing you can do is wait until you get laid off to go and start networking. That's the worst time to go start networking with people, right? So you've got to start doing it now. I mean, it's sort of like your insurance policy in a way. Now that said, I mean, I thought I was pretty good at that. It didn't work for me. I didn't get a job, but it ended up getting me other opportunities. You know, it got me like, you know, I was able to sell some books. I was able to do this. I was able to, you know, get sponsorships. I was able to do these other things. So that worked out for me, but like it didn't get me that full-time job. So it all depends what you're trying to do. But I would say the other thing too, going back to the very beginning, is have a goal. Like, what's your goal? What are you trying to do? Like, don't go on LinkedIn, just message people because you want a job. I mean, that's not going to work. If your goal is to have a job, you're going to approach that very differently than if your goal is to be a content influencer, right? A content creator and influencer.
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
So
that
that's
is good.
long-winded answer, but
That is really great. Packed food with advice. So that's great. All right. Let's take in this angle of business. Designers need to learn business,
mm-hmm,
which is a statement that I genuinely believe started with great intentions, but now is
mm-hmm.
starting to sound very trite.
Yeah,
Just
what does
like,
it mean,
you
right?
need to learn business for your for things to evolve for you. But like, what exactly does that mean?
Mm-hmm,
Do we begin to just tell designers do XYZ without a proper or clear roadmap of where they might even begin to pull
mm-hmm.
that thread, right? What exactly is this understanding to start with?
Yeah.
How can designers understand and tailor their learning? Otherwise, it becomes a long winded process, right? Yeah. And how do they just constantly maintain that lens where it's understanding that, yes, you learn business, but your core priority is also just finding ways to ensure that the business interests and the user needs are sort of balanced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think it's you're absolutely right. It's become trite. It has become very trite. Learn the code, learn the business, learn the this, learn AI. Like, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. Not learn business is a misnomer. I think it should be learn your business. Learn your business. Like, what does your business do? How does your business make money? And when you're joining a new team, to me, this is part of your onboarding. It should be part of your onboarding process. Is what is the why? How do you make money? Who do you charge? Who pays for it? Why do they pay for it? How often do they pay for it? Who are your competitors? What are they doing differently that you're doing? Why do you think your company is better than them? And what is your competitive advantage in this space? You don't need an MBA to have a conversation with an executive,
True.
right? You just need to understand what they think and what they care about. And this goes back again to the parts we talked about, the relationships. Understanding these things, you can absolutely get through a relationship. You can also do it through the internet and just Googling stuff. Like, if you're at a big company, you certainly can go look up the CEO and figure out what they care about, right? Like, I'll give you a good example. I used to work at GE, and GE was like a giant multinational conglomerate at the time when I joined. They had, I don't know how many businesses, like, NBC, they own NBC,
Oh, wow.
appliances, lights, they made jet engines, they made locomotives, they made wind turbines, they
Oh,
made
wow.
literally everything, right? And a new CEO took over, and that CEO started to break the company up into smaller things. He leaned everything out. Now, you could go and Google Larry Culp and see that the last few companies he was the CEO of, he did the exact same thing, right? So what does that tell you? Well, it tells me that Larry Culp doesn't care about sharing across businesses. He doesn't care about reusing code because he's going to break them up into separate companies. So you guys spending all this effort to make one app to share across 5 businesses is a complete waste of time, because Larry Culp doesn't care about that. What Larry Culp cares about is each individual business being as efficient and lean as possible so he can sell them. That
Interesting.
changes how you build software.
Yeah.
Right? So you could Google that. Right? You could also talk to people in your team who might work with him on a daily basis, right? Or people that work with people he works with on a daily basis, and get insights that way. So, there's learning your business can be Googling it if it's a big company. It could also just be conversations with people like stakeholders, like, what do you care about? What are you held responsible for? What are your priorities, right? Because they're going to come to you and say, I need you to add this widget to this page, and I need it done by Friday. And you could go do it. But like, if you don't understand why that widget needs to be there and what metric that's going to help improve, or how that's going to help the bottom line in some way, there's 1,000 ways you could design that widget, right? And they're not going to tell you how to design the widget. That's not their job. Their job is to get the functionality so that it can improve something. And they've made a decision somewhere up the road before you ever got to you that widget will help improve some key metric somewhere. Right? That's not their job to explain that to you every single time they ask you to do something, right? I think that's your job to figure that out. And so learning your business means understanding how that new feature that what that roadmap that you have, how does that impact overall? What's the strategy? Why did they decide that? Why did they decide to do this one first? Why did they push this other one back? What does the resources look like? How much money do they have to spend on engineers versus UX design? And how willing are they to change this? How flexible are they? Are they held under certain standards or this or that, whatever it is? Like, understanding your business is the critical aspect, not business, like it's some nebulous thing. Because your job is not to go start a business, Your
Well,
job is to help that business make money. It might be, but most people probably are going to be hired to do a job and asked to do it really well and hopefully get paid a bunch. And your job is to figure out like how your contribution helps this overall, strategy, goal, whatever.
mm, that's really good. Okay, so let's wrap this up with designers who currently might be feeling burnt out or disillusioned with the challenges that are just cropping up and also the speed with which the industry is evolving. This is the year of AI really
Yeah.
solidifying, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah.
seen so many experimentation now. Everybody claims AI in their hero section, right? And we're also seeing so many tools evolve, right? The fun thing is right before this us recording, I was sat on my computer and I got the usual Friday email that from my daughter's school that's just completely overwhelming all the time. The one thing you never realize is how many emails schools send.
Oh
And
God. Yeah.
week in, week out, it's just overwhelming just how many things I have to stay on top of for the new week. And I went on V0 and just like create a dashboard for me to keep track of all of the things that I need to do, right?
Yeah.
And I was just inspecting the code and inspecting the dashboard it created, and like, oh my god, like I don't know how to code, but I have a working prototype that I could potentially take forward and create something else out of that. Now I've like already got whatever sets of code I need to deploy for an iOS app. And that's the speed with which we're dealing with things, right? And many people are
Yeah.
starting to build incredible tools out of these capabilities. Designers might be feeling burnt out, might be feeling disillusioned, might be feeling scared or terrified at the speed of innovation. What's your advice?
Yeah. Well, I think this is VUCA. This goes back to VUCA. I think this is exactly ambiguity, right? Now, it could also be volatility and things are changing constantly. The tools are changing all the time. I mean, it's like a mix, right? It's a mix of all these things. But I think going back to this is where I love that VUCA framework because I think it applies to work. I think it also applies to personal life and everything else. What can you control? What can you actually control? Like you can get burnt out, banging your head against the wall, trying to do all these things and get overwhelmed. But what can you actually control? Right. And then thinking about, we talked about, uncertainty, right? Like having a backup plan. Like, what's your backup plan? Like, let's say AI takes over and there are no more junior designer roles. What are you going to do? What is your backup plan?
I feel like
Right.
we're starting to see it disappear massively, to be fair.
Was it, I think it was like, was it Mark Zuckerberg talked about this in that thing with Joe Rogan recently about like his plan is to take every junior and mid-level engineer and replace it with AI in like the next couple of years. What does that mean for the industry? Like that is awful. That is like absolutely awful for everybody. You've got to have a backup plan, right? What is your backup plan? And so that's just something you can't control. You can control that. Whether that's saving a bunch of money, winning the lottery, like I don't know, but to have a backup plan. And so, that's the thing, like learn a new skill that won't be replaced by AI potentially. But then again, like who knows, AI might replace everything. I have no idea. But that's where this concept I think of VUCA is really important is like focus on what you can control. Get as much information as you can, right? Is a lot of this just like clickbait, hype, or is it legitimate, right? To answer your question though about getting burnt out, when it comes to like the market and that kind of stuff, that's very stressful and I totally get that. But there's also people getting burnt out at work that are being asked to do this and they're trying to change. We talked about low design maturity, trying to change their team. I think at a certain point when you're at work, check out. Just check out. Like you don't have to change the world. Right? Designers come into this like, oh, design's going to change everything. I'm going to solve all the problems. I'm going to do this and that. And then they can't do anything that they expect to do. They get frustrated and upset and everything. There is nothing wrong with just getting a paycheck every 2 weeks and doing the bare minimum. Like nothing. There's nothing wrong with that. I am paid for a bare minimum amount of work. You got it. That's it. Does it mean I'm going to get a promotion next year or a raise? Maybe not. My performance review might be like meets expectations. That's it. Meet expectations and do the bare minimum, get paid, and then find a hobby. Do something else that you enjoy. Spend time with your kids, build more Legos, take a cooking class, learn to play guitar, learn a new language. Like spend the time. You don't have to work all night, right? So that's like one aspect of burnout. The other one with the AI stuff and with like just job hunting and all that other stuff, I don't even have an answer. I think like just take a break, think about something else for a little bit, go camping, go for a hike, go for a walk.
Or do a side project.
I don't know.
Side project.
Yeah, side project maybe for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
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 Lex Roman has this. I love it. She has this thing she said to me a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about. I don't know if you know Lex Roman. She's on. She has a newsletter. Journalists pay themselves and things like that. Anyway, she's awesome and she's on LinkedIn a lot. And we were talking a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about like full-time job and side hustles and all this stuff. And she's like, a lot of people out in Silicon Valley, they say they're founders, and they act as if they're all entrepreneurs. Most of them have jobs. They just don't tell you that, and you'd never know.
Whoa.
But they call it outside funding. So like that job is like outside funding, and they actually have jobs. And like that's the other thing too with burnout, right? You see all these people online as if they're like, oh, they're like perfect life, and blah. It's all bullshit. It's all fake, imaginary, this persona that they present the world. And if you let that impact how you approach your own life, you're going to be very, very sad and very, very upset. So like just, I would say, shit, close like social media, get off TikTok, get off LinkedIn for a little while, get off Twitter, and just take a break, whatever that means. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have an answer for this last part about like burnout with the industry. Yeah.
You have given a bunch. Oh, thank you so much, Jeremy. This has been such a great conversation. Thank you for coming onto the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I am so excited to do it. And if you want to check out the book, beyonduxdesign.com/book, I've got a free preview on there too. If you want to check that out, and you can get it on Amazon, you can get it at my website. And it's also, by the way, international. If anybody's worried about international shipping and stuff like that, the book is actually print on demand. So it takes a little while to actually get to you, but it is printed in Europe and Asia and North America. So if you think, hey, this thing's gonna be too expensive for me, I can't get it, the shipping is actually not that bad because it's printed relatively close to where you are. So anyway, I had a few people concerned about that, but
that's good to know. Yeah, and you can also get a code design.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, if you get the book, the code's only going to work at beyonduxdesign.com/book or /shop or just beyonduxdesign.com. Was it Growth Design Pod?
Yes,
all one word. And you'll get what did we say? 15% off?
Yeah, 15%.
We didn't say 15% off. So get 15% off, and it's also free shipping with orders over $30. And on my website, I got a bunch of other stuff like prints, art prints, and things like that. So I have one that I love. It's like you can't build great software without great relationships print, and some other cool prints and things like that, which I really love. So you get all that stuff. So
absolutely,
check it out.
Who knows? We might actually. Should we collaborate on a poster?
Ooh, I would love to. I actually, one of the things I was trying to do was think about like just quotes from like guests and people I've had on the show.
Oh, cool.
And just random stuff. And I would do it totally. Yeah. What do you got? What's a good quote? Nice. You got a good quote? I'll put you on the spot.
Oh my God. Okay. Get over yourself.
Get over yourself? I love that.
and then I can illustrate a backdrop, a very serene backdrop to go with that.
I love it. I'm not an illustrator. Everything I do is like type based. Really? So if you've got like a cool illustration, we could make some type with some illustration stuff.
Yes,
hell yeah, I'm down, dude.
Happy to. I love illustration.
I'm down.
I'll send to you.
Let's do it. Let's collab. We'll talk offline.
Exactly. All right. Thank you so much. Yeah, there are so many takeaways from this episode. I mean, we started talking about the real craft of UX, digging into Jeremy's journey, and just talking about all the thoughts around the importance of the human aspect of our job as designers, and just going beyond what you think your job is, which is basically being able to see and look around at the different disciplines that you interface with. And it's not necessarily about understanding every single discipline. I mean, I don't think you can if you tried. But the point is for you to treat and see your teammates as the humans they are. And from there, form genuine relationships that can help improve how you also get your work done. It just makes life easier in general. Emmanuel, do you have any takeaways you want to highlight?
Yeah, I mean, I think you really said most of them. Right, but I think two key takeaways for me, it's the reinforcement of the need for communication within teams, right, for me, and the way Jeremy really broke it down into different pebbles and how you could really kickstart some of those relationships, like some of those points when he talked about getting to know you calls, just title the call getting to know you. Like, I found that very insightful. And also one thing he said also, which like a key takeaway for me, was like the real relationship of like the virtual world, start with the DMs, like start with the commenting. Like a lot of people get that wrong.
Mm.
Just like for like and just DM and it does bounce back. I think this is really beyond UX, like beyond the tools that we do. How do we really bring that human part of ourselves out so that it's all complete? Like you can't just be staring in front of your Figma file for only God knows when. Talk to people, know what everybody's up to. Then that's when you could really say, yeah, I'm thriving it at this skill, at this particular profession. Yeah, thanks so much, Jeremy, for this wealth of knowledge you shared.
Yeah.
Yeah, of
And
course. I
just to
love
give
it.
you a joke on that, someone DM'd me recently, absolutely out of the blue. And not only just a DM, but also got my name wrong. There's a two
Oh,
things you
jeez.
don't do. Like, so if you're going to DM someone completely cold DMs, the least you can do is at least make sure you have a message, like go to the point and don't get their name wrong. It wasn't even a
Yeah.
misspelling. It was just a different name. And I was like, wait, what?
It's
So yeah.
ridiculous. Yeah.
Copy paste, trying to do
Exactly.
like a cold outreach. Yeah,
Yeah, and does that work? I mean, what's the
I
point of
don't
that? You
know.
know, it doesn't do anything. It's just such a silly. Yeah,
You just annoy
whatever.
people. That's what you do.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's so dumb.
instead just build quality relationship and make things easy.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it.
All right. That's it. We are going to go into the lightning round of
Oh,
questions.
I love it.
And Jeremy, the plan is okay. This year, Emmanuel, we're going to actually try to make it lightning round questions, like make it go quick. That's the point.
Oh, okay. I talk a lot, so we'll see. Just like probably be like, "Can you shut up? Move on to the next one." Yeah.
Okay, so it has to be pretty fast. That's just a rule. Like it's a game, right? Let's just
Oh
take
my
it like
god.
a
Okay.
game.
All right. All
Yeah.
right. All right.
Top three products you use daily and you love.
Oh, all right. Is this physical or digital products?
Anything.
Anyone I want it.
Anything. Okay, good. Because I don't have any digital products I use. I actually try to avoid. All right. I have this pen. This pen is amazing. This is the I was looking it up because I could answer this question. The James brand Burwell pen. It's
Oh,
like $70. It's expensive as hell, but this is like the most amazing pen I've ever owned. I use it all the time, every single day. I love it. The other thing I love, my wife got me this cup. This is I don't know if you've ever been to New York City, but they have like all these little coffee stands throughout where you get coffee. This is like a ceramic version of that coffee mug, and I just love it. I use this like
Nice.
literally every day. What's the other thing? The other thing I use, this is weird. I don't know if this is weird for people in Europe, but I carry a pocket knife because I'm in the South. But I have this pocket knife. This is the Vastid Corgi Pup. It's a little small pocket knife. I love this thing. It's like one hand. I can just open it and close it by
what do
myself.
you use it for?
Opening stuff mostly. I have kids, so like I've always got crap. They're like, oh, I got a thread on my jacket or whatever. Yeah. Plus, I guess if I get robbed, I could just, I don't know. I've never had to do that. Hopefully, I don't have to deal with that. But yeah, I actually had. Like, so this is funny. Like, I grew up in the South, and like literally everybody carries pocket knives in the South. Everybody, like, well, not everybody, most people do. And I moved up to Cincinnati, and I had somebody who like that pocket knife really makes me uncomfortable. And I was like, "Fuck, are you talking?"
Definitely.
I don't know. Anyway, I was just like, what? It was just culture shock for me. I was like, you kidding me? It makes you uncomfortable. What do you think I'm gonna do? Anyway, so those are the three. I think those three things, right? Was that too slow? Did I explain too much? Should I have just like?
Now you try. It's just that the answers were very weird.
Uh,
So good.
Yeah. One design resources you keep going back to.
oh my god. I don't like do as much design nowadays, like being like a manager, leader, strategy thing.
What works for you in your context then?
Yeah, just like I don't know. Probably. This is a really hard question. I don't know if I have an answer. Well, I actually go to. Well, I do a lot of stuff for like the podcast. So I do that. I do a lot of design for the podcast. Creative Market.
Oh
Yeah,
yes,
Creative Market.
yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So they have like a thing where they do like a free gift. Like they used to do it every week. Now I think
No,
they
yeah.
realized people were just they do it once a month, and it's like only a few things now.
Mhm.
But I would go and check out their free gifts. But I use that a lot for like templates for things and
Mhm.
all that stuff. But yeah,
I
Creative
can
Market.
relate hard
Yeah.
to that. Okay.
Yeah. 3 books you like to recommend.
Oh, all right. I have got a couple. They don't have to be design books, right?
No.
Okay, so I'm gonna go with the first one, Articulating Design Decisions by Tom Griever, one of my favorite design books ever. He's my boss now, which is kind of crazy.
Oh, he's here. That's
Anyway,
so cool.
yeah, I work for Tom. Anyway, I'm not just saying that to get a promotion, Tom. By the way, I love your book. Tom also wrote the foreword for Beyond UX Design, which I'm
Yes.
really excited about. The other book that I really love is Start with Why. I
Yes.
like this one a lot. Simon Sinek. This one's a really great one, and I just believe very strongly like this again goes back to like the relationship part. Like when you're speaking with stakeholders, you got to understand what they care about. You can't talk about the what. You got to talk about the why. So I really like that. I think that's helpful.
Nice.
And then the other book, I don't have it on my shelf, but I'm really into like historical nonfiction. So like history books and stuff. And there's Bart Ehrman. He is a former evangelical Christian turned atheist who now is a biblical scholar, which is like really interesting. An atheist biblical scholar. But anyway, he writes a bunch of books about like the historic Jesus and how the Bible was written and all that stuff and how it kind of evolved over time. But there one that I really like is Misquoting Jesus, which is about all of the different discrepancies in the Bible. And, you know, anyway, it's a really great book. It's a very thought-provoking book as someone who grew
Nice.
up, you know, going to Catholic school my whole life. It's just like, I wish I had this book when I was in high school because I would have had so many arguments with my religion teachers. I'm going to give it to my kids when they grow up and they start reading. Anyway, I love that book. It's a good book.
Nice. What profession will you be instead of your current role?
Ooh. All right. I would love to be a voice actor. If I could get someone to pay me to be a voice actor. I've taken some classes. I've taken some classes and I just like, I don't know how to break into the industry, but carpenter if I couldn't be a voice actor.
Why carpentry?
You know, some of my hands, you know, like I love like the physical thing. I just built a thing, you know, it's like plumbing, electrical. You can't really see it. It's in a wall. Carpentry, you're like, I see it. I see the thing I built, you know, I don't know.
Sure.
I just love that, you know?
But honestly, I actually see the voice acting one, especially
Yeah.
the intro to your podcast.
Energetic, yeah.
Honestly, every
Yeah.
time I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, listen to him go.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, if anybody listening that is looking for a voice actor, call me up. I need a manager or something because I just have no idea how to get a voice acting gig. I've tried like Fiverr and all that crap. I haven't gotten a single person reach out on Fiverr. Probably I'm charging too much. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. What's your favorite food?
All right, my favorite food, red beans and rice.
Ooh, nice.
It's a New Orleans thing.
Yeah.
Southern thing, I guess. Well, maybe Southern Louisiana thing.
Um,
Red beans and rice, it's like a Creole dish. Have you ever heard of like New Orleans red beans and rice?
I have. The reason I
Yeah.
said ooh was like there was a London food festival. I think was it like 2 years ago now that I went to, and there was an entire southern US section, and
Oh, okay.
I had some, and I was like, oh my god.
Yeah, it's so good. You so when I make mine, here's
Does it taste Nigerian?
What?
You need
Does
to
it?
taste Nigerian.
No, it
Oh,
does.
like it's similar. So there's a lot of like you know New Orleans very close to the Caribbean, obviously, and so there's like rice and peas in Jamaica and stuff. This is more like rice and peas is drier. This is more wet, like creamy. It's like a beans turn it. So like you cook them for hours, dude. So like I know we said we'd go quick. Do you guys care if I talk about this? All right. So it's traditionally a thing you would cook on Mondays. So back in the day, before we had like you know laundry and stuff like laundromats, like early like late 1800s and stuff. You would put a pot of red beans on the stove and you would go out and do your laundry on a Monday, and it's cooking the whole day while you're doing your laundry. You're going out, putting the clothes on the laundry line and all that stuff. So the beans cook all day. So they cook down so much they like start to like dissolve, but it gets like creamy. And so anyway, but it's like it's not like whole beans. Like you actually a lot of times you'll like mash the beans up on the side of the pot when you're cooking it. So like you mash about half the beans. So you get like some whole, but it's like just they're not hard at all. And you cook it with like sausage, and we call it pickle meat, which is like pickled pork, which is like I don't know what cut of pork, but it's like brined, kind of like similar to like how you might do like a corned beef kind of, but pickles. But I'm sorry, but pork. So you cook that, it's just like meaty and just so you eat it with rice, and it's so good. A lot of people do like fried chicken too. You do a fried chicken or a fried pork chop. Anyway, some cornbread maybe. Oh my god, so good, so good. Anyway, red beans and rice. That's my favorite.
Yeah, favorite movie.
Favorite movie. Oh, this is hard. Office Space, for sure.
Space.
Oh, you've never seen Office Space? All right, this movie is like. It's funny because it's about people working in software, and I love this movie. I watched it all the time before I ever started working in software. Mike Judge, he did Beavis and Butthead.
Okay.
You know Mike Judge, Beavis and Butthead.
No.
So this came out '90s, late '90s. It's a kind of old movie.
That's why.
Mike Judge, he's the guy who created Beavis and Butthead. Anyway, he wrote this movie. This guy Peter, who like has this like he worked at this software company called Initech and like just burnt out, and he has this like epiphany and he just like stopped showing up for work, and but he gets promoted and stuff. Anyway, it's just really funny, hilarious movie. If you've never seen Office Space, that's my favorite.
I'll check it out. Yeah. All right. Thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Jeremy, for being here. This was
Yeah, of course.
fantastic. All
My
right.
pleasure.
And until next time, guys, see you soon.
All right. Thanks, y'all. Really, really excited to join. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.